Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about that Utah-Oklahoma State game, one that got a little bit of a wrench thrown into it last night. Sounds like Cam Rising might not go, although all we know is a line moved very, very aggressively last night on this game. Went from about 2.5 or 2 to favor to Utah to 2.5 to Oklahoma State side. So quite the flip. There's no two ways about that, and really can only mean one thing. But we'll hold out. We'll see what happens in the next little bit, and we'll definitely update you if he is not or if he is the starter going into that game. But let's get into the other top four week 4 games, because we have a number that are going to be really, really fun, and feel like we got to give some shine to the game that's going on in Lincoln, Nebraska, because the reality is there was no one that circled this game. And I understand it was going to be a very interesting game to see where Nebraska was at going into the Big Ten. People had expectations for Nebraska, not so much for Illinois. And maybe we were just outright wrong about that one. This is a very, very fun team. Luke Altmaier is playing really good quarterback. Caden Finnegan, is playing really, really solid football. A lot of really talented players over there at Illinois. And I think it's one of those interesting things where Nebraska's defense is going to be a lot stingier against the run than Colorado is. So you're going to have to get more from Dylan Raiola. That's the end-all be-all in this game. This is the game where he really has to kind of grow up and make those really great decisions down the stretch. Now, Colorado was another big-time moment, don't get me wrong, but the holes are going to be a little bit thinner in the Illinois back end, and the Illinois back end might be a little bit attackable, but definitely not quite as much as that Colorado team, and you won't be able to run the ball just over and over and over again and ride your way to a victory. Maybe you will, but I'd be a little bit shocked if that was the way that Nebraska went about business. So you're going to have to see more from Dylan Raiola. You're going to have to see him mature a lot on Friday night, and cannot wait to see this on Friday night, because these two teams, the way they've been playing to start the year, deserve a little bit of a standalone game that everyone has their eyes on. So very much like that, but it's going to be really, really fun to watch this one. I think it's one of those games that everyone really likes the Huskers. Everyone's a little bit questionable about what Illinois is right now. Maybe things happened on Saturday that we do not expect, and maybe Illinois comes out of this one as the dark horse in the Big Ten, not the team that we normally think. But overall, I am going to go Nebraska. I do think they are the more solid, more complete team, and I think Illinois is one of those teams that is going to be able to play good football pretty much every week, not be able to be easy to beat, because they're not going to hand you a ton. But I also think when Nebraska has as many dudes as they have, as much depth as they have comparative to Illinois, it's just going to be a little bit tough. It's going to be a little bit tough sledding, especially offensively, and I expect Nebraska to win. Now, Illinois does have a little bit of a kind of equalizer. They've been +8 on turnover margin this year. Nebraska's +3. So maybe that's the big difference. Maybe they can get a pick or two from the young kid and make all the difference in this game. But as of right now, I am going to lead Nebraska. I feel pretty confident in that pick. But Illinois, I felt pretty confident in picking Kansas against them. So maybe they should feel good about me not necessarily liking them in this game. And then moving on, Kansas-West Virginia is a very weird game. Going into this season, I think this was one of those where I looked at it and said, that's going to have something to do with what the Big 12 is this year. Didn't necessarily know how aggressive it was going to be, but it felt like both these teams were primed to make some noise, to at least be in the conversation down the stretch. It doesn't seem like that anymore. Kansas has a loss to Illinois and then to UNLV in back-to-back weeks. West Virginia falls in week 1 to Penn State and then falls last week in heartbreaking fashion to Pitt. There's so many different things that have played in the first couple of weeks of the season that have kind of just taken a little bit of juice out of this one. I'll be totally honest. It's going to be a really fun game nonetheless, but it's one that both very badly need to win. Kansas's offense has been all over the place since Andy Kotelnicki walked out the door, and Jalen Daniels has just not been effective throwing the ball nearly as much as he was before. So maybe that Andy Kotelnicki hire is the best in the entire country, not only because of what he's doing at Penn State, but because of what he left behind at Kansas, because it's still some very talented kids in that room, but the scheme is not nearly where it needs to be. And then both these teams are going to try to beat you on the ground. That's the way they go about business. C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White for West Virginia. You have Devin Neal, you have Daniel Highshaw, and Jalen Daniels, obviously, running the ball on the other side. That's going to be the way this goes about business, and frankly, there's a number of different ways that could go. There's a number of different ways. Maybe the West Virginia defense plays a little bit better on Saturday and is able to stifle this attack, that maybe you force them into some passing downs and make life tough for Jalen Daniels. On the flip side, maybe West Virginia just can't get anything going passing the ball, because that's been a big time problem early on in the season, and Kansas can just tee off on these running backs all day. So it's going to be a really interesting battle. It's one of those that you look at it and you really thought early on in the season this would be a fun dark horse battle in the Big 12, that one of these teams winning would kickstart them into something special, and maybe it still could. The Big 12 could get absolutely crazy and everyone have 2 losses at the end of the day, but both these teams at the end of the day are walking into this one as a must-win, and they are viewing this as, we have to get back on track if we want any shot to salvage the season. Someone's going to come out really angry. Someone's going to come out really upset. Give me the Mountaineers. I think they are very, very mad about the way that last game ended. I think Kansas is a team that just doesn't have enough answers offensively. I think if you can force them into passing downs, they're not going to be effective. So as of right now, I think I'd go West Virginia on this one. It's going to be a really fun matchup, and whoever walks out a winner, you're still alive. Whoever walks out a loser, you are on a really weird road to a very disappointing season. But moving forward, Rutgers going into Virginia Tech is awesome. I cannot wait for this game for a number of different reasons, because I circled both of these teams going into the season, and I feel pretty good about what about Rutgers right about now. Don't feel quite as good about Virginia Tech. They have yet to find anything really going in this offense. Now, they still have plenty of guys that can make plays. Kyron Drones with his legs. They have Bashaw Tootin, Bashaw Tootin, that's a very talented running back. They have guys that can make plays, no doubt about that, but they got to find more in the pass game. They have to find Jalen Lane, I believe. Yes, Jalen Lane. You have to find those guys in space. You have to be able to get Ollie Jennings a couple of big-time plays. Whatever this looks like, Virginia Tech just has to get this offense going. On the other side, it's going to be a lot of Kyle Mine, the guy. If they cannot stop him early, he's going to take that energy out of that building in a second. I can promise you that. Kyle Mine, the guy, has 375 yards, 8.1 yards per carry thus far throughout the season. He's been absolutely incredible. He is awesome. He does everything you'd want him to do on the football field, and he's one of those guys that I just cannot wait to watch every single weekend. So absolutely love him. I think they're off a little bit of a bye week last week for Rutgers, so a little bit more well-rested. Didn't necessarily get tested too much in the first couple of weeks, so walking into Blacksburg is going to be a totally different battle, and we'll see what happens. I think this is one of those games that I'm going to lean Virginia Tech in, and I think, frankly, if this was a neutral site, I'd probably lean Rutgers. If it was at Rutgers, I'd definitely lean Rutgers, but I don't know. I think that home field advantage is going to do just enough. I think Virginia Tech's running game is going to be able to at least slow down Rutgers enough on the offensive side of the ball, and I don't know. It's one of those games that I think I could throw a dart at the dartboard and feel as confident as I am right now making this pick, but I am going to go Virginia Tech. I am going to go for them to beat Rutgers, and it's going to be, if Rutgers can get this win before I finish this up, they could go 9-3. I just want that on everyone's radar. This is a game that could totally change the season for the Rutgers, for the Knights, and it could be so much fun to watch them throughout the rest of the season. This is the moment. If they can win this one, then I feel like this is a program that has as much energy as anyone in the country. If they fall, then you're asking some questions looking at a terrifying Big Ten schedule coming up. I had to talk about this one, and it's not that it's one of the best games of the weekend. It's not that it's anything crazy. It's that I don't know when the bleeding stops. I have to know when the bleeding stops. I want to be the first person there when it does. Frankly, I don't know if it does in this game, but the reality is Florida State is reeling. There's no two ways to put it. They are all over the place. They have very little discernible plan offensively. They have a bunch of guys, but no discernible plan defensively. They got a little bit better last week, so I don't want to tear them down too much. But at the end of the day, it looks like a lot of guys with not a lot of organization right now over there at Florida State. For Cal, they've been kind of rolling. They walked into Auburn, got a big-time win when Jaden Ott was essentially a non-factor in that game. You had so many different things go right in that game, and they played really, really solid defensive football against a team that can definitely take the top off you in Auburn. So it's going to be incredible to watch this one unfold. This is the moment where we talked about it last week. Florida State's just got to win one of these ones. They have to be able to at least get in the win column, subside their fans for 6 days, and then figure out where you are, because that's the only way forward. It's not going to be a pretty season. You're going to have to wade through some very, very dangerous waters to get to the end of this one, and then maybe you'll be on a little bit calmer of waters and you'll be able to figure all this out. But overall, I think it's one of those things that I just cannot touch Florida State right now. I don't think there's a world or any team that they could play right now where I would say, okay, that's Florida State, let's move forward, no worries. Cal is a good team. They're going to be able to be coached really, really well. They have a Twitter fan base that has become one of my favorite over the last couple of days. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But a very, very fun matchup. One of those that it's an ACC matchup. And it sounds crazy to say that, but it absolutely is. And we'll see if Cal can keep this thing rolling, roll into ACC schedule with a big-time win. And we'll see if Florida State can salvage this ship, if they can get everything a little bit back on track and win 4 games. I know it sounds crazy to getting it back on track leads to winning 4 games, but that's where they are right now. There's no two ways about that. So it's going to be awesome to watch that one unfold. Then you had Baylor, Colorado, and we'll talk about this one a little bit later, so I won't waste too much time here, but I love this matchup. I think it's going to be so much fun. You have Dave Aranda on the other side calling defensive plays against an elite quarterback in Shedeur Sanders. It's going to be so much fun to see what he throws at him, how he makes life uncomfortable, how many times he blitzes, or does he just trust the 4 guys up front to do what they need to do, and then drop 7, 8 guys in coverage every play. I tend to believe the latter is the way that they'll go, but we'll see what happens there. And then on the Baylor side, they don't know who their quarterback is quite right about now. Daquan Finn went out with an injury last week, and Sawyer Robertson came in and played really good football. He was very, very clean throughout that game and was one of those guys that absolutely gave you a really good chance to win there. They have an or on that depth chart, which is very, very daunting for every fan base out there. If you see an or next to your quarterback, not necessarily what you love to see, but I do think Daquan Finn will likely get the start here, and I think he likely will keep the job going forward, but it's one of those things that throws a little bit of a wrench into this, and it might just be what decides this game, how they handle this quarterback situation. And then from the Colorado perspective, this is about you taking the physicality that you had in the Nebraska game, taking the energy you had in the Colorado State game, and combining them. We need to see Colorado week over week, not just play this incredible game on Saturday and then the next day play a little bit flat or just not come out as strong as they need to. We have to see it over multiple weeks. This is a huge game for them, one of those games that I think could define a lot of what Colorado is going forward, and I definitely was wildly impressed with what they did against Colorado State. If they get a big-time win here, I'll be even more impressed. It'll be an absolutely huge win, but I think I'm going to lean Baylor here. It sounds a little bit crazy coming out of my mouth, honestly, but I do think Dave Aranda is going to be able to cause enough problems. I think the run game is not going to be able to get going for Colorado, which is not a surprise by any means. Isaiah Auguste seems like he might be able to go, so we'll see what happens there, and that will be very, very fun to watch. But as of right now, I just have to lean Baylor in this one. I think Colorado's a really good team and absolutely has every chance to win this game. I think there's enough stuff going in Baylor's direction that I'll lean the Bears in this one and maybe have to eat some crow on Monday. But finally, Kansas State is heading over to BYU. We talked about this one when we talked about the upset potential. It definitely is. This one is going to get absolutely crazy. BYU has an elite atmosphere. Kansas State is a team that has played one good game of football, and that's about it. And we don't really know what this team is quite yet. It felt like they found something against Arizona, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they're still a little bit all over the place trying to figure out who they are, and we'll find out on Saturday, that is for sure. I think this KSU defense needs to be much better than it has been. Jake Retzlaff is one of those guys that can cause so many problems for you. With his arm, with his leg, they have a really good receiver in Chase Roberts that is going to be an interesting matchup to watch, him against this back end with Keenan Garbers and Jacob Parrish on the outside for Kansas State, but it's going to be a really fun matchup. I think it's one of those that you lean all this energy towards what Kansas State had did and what they are capable of doing this year, and then you look at BYU and you say, they're a pretty middle-of-the-road team. They're not necessarily someone to worry about. The second you walk into Provo, Utah, that changes. The second you walk into that stadium, everything changes. There's no longer, BYU is not so great of a team and KSU is more talented at every single position. That doesn't matter. Once you walk into that stadium, you better be ready to go punch for punch because BYU is going to give it to you. Now, I'm having a really hard time going against Kansas State right here just because I do think they found something last week and I have them as my champion in the Big 12, so I think they're going to get off to a nice start here. But overall, this is a game that you should be watching very closely, and maybe you'll come out of it a little bit surprised about how good this atmosphere is up there in Provo. But let's take our third break here, and then we'll get into all of the questions I have heading into week 4, a number including one around Billy Napier that I want to get into right after this, so stick with us.